evening, everyone, and welcome. I would now like to call the July 26, 2022 Longmont City Council regular session to order. Can we have a roll call, please, Don?
Absolutely. Mayor Peck?
Present.
Councilmember Hidalgo-Faring?
Here.
Councilmember Martin? I'll come back to her. She's not on screen. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez?
Here.
Councilmember Waters?
Here.
Councilmember Yarbrough?
Here.
Councilmember Martin?
Here.
Thank you. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So as a reminder to the public, anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be heard, you need to add your name onto the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their names on the list will have the opportunity to speak during public hearing items this evening or at final call public invited to be heard on any item at the end of the meeting. Next on the agenda is the approval of the July 12th minutes. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? I'll second that. It's been moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by myself. All those in favor, vote. I don't see it. No, let's just have a hand vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Did she? Good. I can't see her. Does council have any items to put on future agendas? Seeing none. Dawn, do we have any revisions to the agenda?
We do not, Mayor.
Thank you. Harold, do you have a city manager's report?
No report, Mayor, Council.
Okay. We have a special proclamation tonight. And it is a proclamation, inspiration and recognition of Science and Technology Month in Longmont, Colorado. And we have the robotics team here that this proclamation is for. Whereas Upper Creek Robotics Team and the St. Vrain Schools won world championships by Robotics Challenge Team and Tech Challenge competition. And whereas school students are proficient in developing robotics as part of their education, and whereas the Science Department values this portion of education for development of future scientists, and whereas the St. Vrain school system supports and promotes science and technology in its curriculum for July 2022. Now, therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim July 2022 as Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology Month in Longmont, and call upon the residents of our community to join fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. Would anyone like to come up and say a few words? And then we can take a picture if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Dawn Hudson, and I am a board member of the Gear Alliance, which is the nonprofit that governs and funds Upper Creek Robotics. I'm also an operations mentor for our FRC, our high school team, our largest high school team, and then a mentor for our FLL program that has 6 to 8 teams. So Upper Creek Robotics this year, as you so mentioned, we won worlds both at the FRC stage and at the FTC stage. That's the first time that has ever happened in FIRST, that one organization has won a double championship at that time. This is also the first time that Colorado has won in either of these. So this really was a spectacular, spectacular year for us. We have 3 programs. Like I mentioned before, we have our FRC program, which these 2 are our operations mentor and our operations lead and our technical lead and we have about 80 kids in our program. Our FLL program has about 60 to 80 kids, or hopefully not 80 kids. That'd be bad. So about 60 kids, 6 to 8 teams, 4th through 8th grade. So this year was a very, very good year. We went almost undefeated. We lost 3, right? Lost 3 out of 58 matches throughout the season, so it was a really, really spectacular team. Our FRC team being world champion means that we basically beat 3,200 teams around the world. So it was a really, really great year. Thank you for this honor. We are really, really pleased to be here, and I'm going to turn it over to Frank to talk about FTC.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, I'm Tom Wilkie. I'm a mentor, one of many supporters of the organization. I'm also serve on the Gear Alliance board with Don. And I wanted to thank you, Mayor Peck, and the council for recognizing this team. As Don mentioned, it was quite an accomplishment, and she mentioned that there are 3,200 teams that are associated with the FRC program. With the FTC program, there are 6,300 teams in 60 countries across the world. And the fact that this team was able to win the world championship is spectacular. And we have a range of students from freshmen to seniors. And our seniors, we have 4 seniors this year, and one of our seniors here is Sam. Said 4 years ago that we're going to win the world championship, and I said, yeah, sure. And that's what happened. So we're really very proud of this team. We also wanted to thank the St. Vrain Valley School District, for supporting us. They are a big supporter of our programs, obviously. In addition to some corporate sponsors, among them Toro, Seagate, First RF, Ball Corporation, and others. And then the many adult volunteers like Dawn and me whose purpose is to win competitions, but more than that, to grow the students' capabilities regarding STEM and also regarding citizenship. A large part of the FIRST organization is geared around gracious professionalism and about helping your competitors, even at your detriment if that's required, to uplift the entire STEM community in the world.
Fantastic. Where was this championship held? Where did you go?
Houston, Texas.
Okay.
So there are levels, there are local tournaments that are run in various cities in Colorado. Then there's a state tournament. Our team won the state tournament. That qualified us to be one of 160 teams of the 6,300 teams that went to the World Championship in Houston, Texas.
Fantastic. Would you like a picture?
Yes.
Okay. So the next thing on our presentation is the Boulder County Transportation Tax, and Phil Greenwald, our Transportation Planning Manager, is going to introduce the item and present it.
I'll sort of present it. Mayor and members of City Council, my name is Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the city. And that's my pleasure tonight to introduce Matt Jones, the Boulder County Commissioner, to introduce his team. So with that, I'll introduce Matt.
Well, good evening. Good to see all of you here in Longmont. My name is Matt Jones. I'm a Boulder County Commissioner. Thanks for giving us time for this item. It affects everybody in the county, and so we're going around to the different city councils and talking about it. And I appreciate doing the transportation tax extension conversation. I'm going to also mention 2 other ballot measures we're going to propose or potentially propose this year. We will vote on August 4th to see if those go on the ballot. We did a survey this last May, and there was this real theme of public safety, safety in general, which fits the transportation tax, but it also fits a wildfire mitigation tax and an emergency services tax that we are going to vote on and are considering. I live in Louisville. I'm lucky to have a house. We had ash damage like everybody else, but we still have a house, and but 1,082 other people do no longer have a home, and they're rebuilding, and it's a very difficult process. But what that Marshall Fire told us is we're in different times. Climate change. I used to do work on wildland fire issues, trying to get money for forest health mitigation at the state senate. Used to say, you know, this won't affect my community, but it's really important work. Well, I was wrong, dead wrong. We have a real issue. So what we're suggesting is the transportation tax would be the extension of the 0.1 cent. So it's 1/10 of 1 penny, or 1/10 of one penny, 1/10 of a penny on a dollar. It took me a while to get that out. Fire mitigation at the same rate. And it's 2 parts of it. There's the forest health part, the fire shed work you may be familiar with. Longmont's a partner in that work, especially around your water supply at Button Rock Reservoir. And that's where we just got some state money, which we're really excited about. But it's $1 million, and that'll treat about 325 acres of forest. And we have something like 64,000 high priority acres that should be treated for fire safety, health, and water issues. The second part of that is you may be familiar with Wildfire Partners, where in the mountains we help people make their homes more fire resistant, more ignition resistant. And we're taking that countywide. We're already doing a pilot east of Boulder, basically. And that we're going to spread that out, and it's a lot different than managing 8,000 people in the mountains and 300,000 on the plains. So it'll look a little different, but that's the idea. Help people make their homes more resilient. Now, you may think that's a long way from Longmont, but I sent Mayor Peck a model, and I'll send the rest to you, of a UCAR scientist who's one of the best in the world, modeling wind patterns and fire. And you might remember on December 30th, there was the Marshall Fire ignition, but there's also the North Fork Fire up by the Greenbrier restaurant. And fortunately, they caught that fire. Her modeling predicted where the Marshall Fire would go, and it predicted that fire, if it would have run all the way into Longmont and through Longmont. And once it gets into houses, the conflagration, it gets all worse. The other tax measure is 0.1% going down after 5 years to 0.05%. And it's for emergency response. You may know Rocky Mountain Rescue, who goes up around 200 calls a year. They're volunteer. We support them, but they have a facility that's falling apart, and we need to help them rebuild a frugal but needed facility, and that's why it goes for 5 years and reduces. We also will work on, we provide ambulance service up in the mountains where all the volunteer fire departments are, to augment them. And the third thing would be, we would help with supplemental to fire districts that aren't municipal areas with equipment and training and all those kinds of things so that they're more prepared. So those are the things we're voting on August 4th. And for me, they're just critical. Times have changed. And we try to be careful about not asking more than we need right now. But we do need this so that we can have homes more resistant to fire, so we can have a chance of stopping a fire in the mountains. It's about firefighter safety in part, because it's a lot easier to put out a fire in an area that has been prescribed thinned with mechanical chainsaws and burned. But we need to think a different way, and that's what we're doing here. But we'll go back and what we'll talk about today mostly, but you can ask questions or give us comments on all three of these. But the transportation tax, we're going to go a little deeper. You've been working on this a while, but I'll let Kathleen Brackey, our Department of Transportation Director, give you an overview of what we're going to do. And again, thanks for letting us talk to you today.
Commissioner Jones, just FYI, I did pass on that information to the other counselors that you sent to me.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Commissioner Jones, for the introduction, and to Mayor Peck and the council for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm Kathleen Brackey. I'm the Deputy Director for Boulder County's Community Planning and Permitting Department, and I lead our transportation planning team. And also with me this evening is Tim Swope from our Public Works Department. So we really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with you about transportation and transportation funding. And I'll just go ahead and go quickly through these. Maybe I'll try this one. And it was all going so well. You want to do it? Or? Oh, there we go. And as we get started this evening, we just have a brief video to share with you that kind of helps to talk about transportation across Boulder County and all the different types of transportation. And I'm going to see if this works, or I'll try it down here. Oh, that did not work. Okay. I'm really glad you're here.
It's okay. It is not opening the other tab. Give me just a second. Can you see that okay, Marcia?
Yes, thank you.
No problem, thanks.
Boulder County is a great place to live, work, and play, with beautiful scenery, countless opportunities for recreation, a strong sense of community, and robust local economies. There's so much to love about Boulder County. Our multimodal transportation network connects our communities and places we want to go. Whether it's taking transit to work, riding a bike on the US 36 bikeway, walking our kids to school, or driving to an appointment, Boulder County's multimodal transportation network helps to get us there.
Going forward, Boulder County's transportation needs are changing, and the transportation system must adapt to meet the community's changing needs. Not everyone has access to all transportation options, and too often our current methods of transportation are too expensive and contribute to climate change and poor air quality. To achieve our community's vision of a safe, sustainable, affordable, and inclusive transportation network, we need to work together to prioritize our transportation investments and plan for a future that serves all of us.
To address the challenges we face now and in the future, Boulder County's Transportation Master Plan provides a blueprint for us to work off of. And as we prepare for the future of getting around our county, we want to continue hearing from you on what you'd like to see the county prioritize.
The TMP includes projects to improve Boulder County roadways, transit, regional trails, and bicycle and pedestrian facilities.
We're working with local and state partners on planning improvements for our regional corridors, such as Colorado 119, US 287, and Colorado 7, Our focus is on the community and giving users multimodal mobility choices regardless of where they are coming from and going to in Boulder County and beyond.
Vision Zero is our ambitious safety program. We set a goal to eliminate serious injury and fatal traffic crashes in unincorporated Boulder County by 2035. We are dedicated to achieving our goal and providing the public with a transportation system where anyone can travel about the county safely and comfortably, regardless of mode. We are going to achieve our goal by collaborating with stakeholders, engaging with the public, and using a proactive, data-driven approach to eliminate crashes and prioritize safer road design and educational strategies.
Boulder County's Mobility for All and youth transportation programs address the unique needs of our vulnerable and underserved populations. We know that transportation is essential to accessing education, healthcare, recreation, and economic opportunities in Boulder County. By enhancing mobility and transportation options for people of all ages, abilities, and incomes, we foster vibrant, healthy, and equitable communities.
We are enhancing our mountain area connections by creating programs and services that are designed for the unique needs of the county's mountain communities. We are working to continue our strong history of combining local, state, and federal funding to bring the community's transportation vision to life. Boulder County prioritizes investments in multimodal corridors to give people options to use all modes of transportation and support our clean air and climate goals. With your help, all of these programs and projects can come together to create a safe, equitable, affordable, sustainable, and resilient transportation system in Boulder County.
To share that video with you. I think it's helpful to see when we talk about transportation, all the different types. And for Boulder County, the focus really is on how do we move people, goods, and services. Oftentimes we can talk about cars and buses and bikes and trucks, but really the transportation system is how are we able to move people through the county. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going here. And when we talk about Boulder County transportation system, it's important to talk about how do we fund those improvements across the county. Like your local community, we receive funding through vehicle registration fees and gas tax, but really the bread and butter or foundational funding for our multimodal transportation system comes from the 0.1% sales tax that Boulder County has had in place for approximately 20 years. And that is really critical for us to be able to continue investing in all of these different transportation options and choices for people. To date, the transportation sales tax for Boulder County has been used to invest in a whole variety of multimodal improvements across the county, connecting the communities together, safety improvements, improvements for people walking and biking and taking transit. And we're very thankful that we've had those resources to do those projects over the years and to partner with local communities like the city of Longmont and to go after grant funding together for state and federal sources. As we look to the future, though, our current sales tax for transportation funding is expiring in mid-2024. And so we need to be thinking about now where do we go from there? And this is, again, that foundational funding for us. And as a transportation planner, when I think about 2024, that feels like tomorrow. So even though we're in 2022. So we have been working for the last several months through Boulder County with the commissioners and outreaching with local jurisdictions and other stakeholders to talk about what can we do and what can we look to the future in order to create a more predictable, sustainable funding source for transportation in Boulder County. The other reason why now is the right time to be talking about this conversation is that for the first time in a long time, in decades, honestly, there's new money available for transportation. There's new state money that's been created by Senate Bill 260 last year, and new federal money for transportation that was created through the federal infrastructure bill. And so the time is right to have the opportunity to go out and get these additional new state and federal dollars. But as we all know, those opportunities come with a local matching requirement. And that local match can be anywhere from 20% to 30, 40%, depending on the type of grant funding. But having a predictable funding source for transportation in Boulder County will help us have those local matching dollars, again, to be able to sustain those partnerships and go after those additional new state and federal funding at this unique moment in time. I also think it's important to talk about what happens if we don't do this, because this isn't a new funding source. This is something we've been relying on now for 20 years. And as I said, it's our basic foundational funding for multimodal transportation. So if we were not able to continue funding for this 0.1% sales tax, we would not be able to continue to offer the programs and services and the types of projects that we're offering today. So it is very important for us, it's very serious for us, and we want to make sure we're able to come forward with options for consideration by the county commissioners and by the voters to be able to sustain our funding sources going forward. And in terms of what would this new funding or extension of funding allow us to do, it will allow us to continue our work around roadway safety and resiliency projects. Again, you heard the message in the video about the importance of Vision Zero and safety across Boulder County. What allows to continue to offer our mobility programs for people of all ages and stages of life. Also continue to sustain building out our regional trails network based on the Trails Master Plan, and also the commuter bikeways across the corridor. And it would also allow us to continue to support transit services across the Boulder County in partnership with all of the other providers, including RTD and others. And so we want to be able to provide complementary or layered transit services in Boulder County using these dollars, again, to help create partnerships and leverage other funding. And then our regional corridors are critical. We talk about transportation across Boulder County. It's not just at the county scale, but it's really connecting the communities across Boulder County. And how are we designing and implementing regional corridors that help people drive, take transit, and connect by other ways across the county. And as we've been giving these presentations to different audiences, one of the questions we've gotten is, well, what do we mean by all of those different descriptions? And, you know, we work in the transportation space on a daily basis, and sometimes we realize we speak a whole different language. And so we wanted to be able to provide some examples of what we mean by these different project category types. So when we talk about mobility and access programs, it's really about the programs and services to help people be able to access the transportation system. So it may be through on-demand services, eco-pass programs. We've just started a new program to offer eco-passes at Boulder County Housing Authority sites. Also education. There's different pass programs out there, but it's sometimes complicated to know how to access those or how to use those. And some of them are, you know, you need to have an app or different things like that. So we want to be able to offer the programs and services to help connect people to those different transportation services so they can get around for all different types of trips across the county. And this summer, we're in the process of wrapping up Boulder County's first coordinated human services plan. And so that, again, highlights some of the action items similar to these listed here on the screen that would help connect people across Boulder County. I also mentioned the roadway safety and resilience projects. Again, how do we have resources to be able to add shoulders to the roadways? Shoulders improve safety for people using all modes of transportation, intersection improvement projects, as well as improvements and repair in our mountain communities. And then also recognizing the impact that climate change is having on our infrastructure system and having dollars available to improve our bridges and culverts to be more resilient over time. And then the importance of our regional trails and bikeways. We have a lot of great examples across Boulder County connecting our communities. Again, they're great for families, they're great for commuting. And then our regional trails and bikeways are also used by many people to connect to regional transit. So each of these different types of infrastructure are important in and of themselves, but also in terms of connecting people to the other modes and services. This slide provides some examples of what we mean by transit service in Boulder County. Again, RTD provides the regional system and some of the local routes as well. And then Boulder County offers services to help complement those routes. So for example, we're funding Ride Free Lafayette, an on-demand service in the Lafayette community. We are partnering with both public and private sector partners on a gun barrel on-demand service to help connect employment centers with the 119 corridor and the recreational shuttles, and then other types of services. We've started a new service this summer called the Lions Flyer. It connects between Lions and Boulder, replacing the service that used to be called the Y that was operated by RTD, but that service was cut. I think a really important service to highlight tonight, especially in Longmont, is the partnership that we all have together to run the Flex service, which is express service between Fort Collins and Loveland and Longmont into Boulder. And that service has been a multi-agency partnership for a number of years. It runs a few trips in the morning in and out of between Larimer County and Boulder County, really serving workforce trips. And so those types of partnerships, I think, are some good examples of how we can leverage our transit funding and be able to partner with other agencies to grow transit options of all different shapes and sizes. And then an important aspect that's highlighted in Boulder County's Transportation Master Plan, and certainly in the Northwest Area Mobility Study that we've all been working on together with our agencies, are these regional corridors. And when we talk about those, it's not just a line on a map, but it's really about creating options and choices for people for all of these corridors. For example, we've been working together for many years on the 119 diagonal project connecting Longmont and Boulder. And then also recognizing that it's about 30% of the people traveling on 119 are actually traveling to and from Larimer and Southwest Weld County. So it's very much a regional, interregional corridor. But what I think is important when I look at this map is that each of the corridors are important, 287 and 119, but it's about when you put them all together, it really creates a network of mobility so that people have options and choices to connect across Boulder County and beyond. So as we were developing the different funding scenarios for transportation funding, we looked at a whole range of options and what could be funded at all those different levels. And then, as Commissioner Jones mentioned, Boulder County conducted the public survey and the polling. And really what we learned through that is while there might be a whole set of options that could be looked at in terms of funding levels, really where people feel more comfortable today is just with the straight extension of the current level of funding at the 0.1% or that tenth of a penny level to continue that going forward. So that is really important to us because, again, we could come up with all kinds of ideas, but if they're not going to be supported by the community and by the public and by the voters, that's not very practical to bring that forward. So this really helped to inform our recommendations at the staff level is to bring forward this recommendation for an extension of the current funding for transportation at that 0.1% level. I'll go through these pretty quickly. And so as we look forward, well, I always think it's helpful to look back before we look forward. So in terms of how have we been investing these dollars over the last number of years, really, again, it's been that combination of roadway, trails, and transit and regional corridors. As we look forward for investing in transportation in the future, we want to continue funding at all of those important categories and also add a portion of funding for those mobility programs, those really critical services and programs to help vulnerable populations across Boulder County. So we're recommending that we squeeze in a little bit of funding for those programs as well. So this is just a summary of some of the types of projects we've developed. A draft project list that we've shared with Phil and with other staff from across the communities across Boulder County, again, wanting to get a good balanced approach of a multimodal investment package to bring forward for consideration. And so really why we're here tonight is to seek your input and your feedback on what do you think are the types of project categories that are most important for us to propose investing in going forward, and which do you think would be most supported by the community. So with that, I'd just like to open it up for questions. As Commissioner Jones mentioned, we're continuing this outreach with communities this month, and then we'll be going to the county commissioners for a public hearing on August 4th. So that wraps up our presentation, and then again, we just have our discussion questions for you all this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Do we have any questions from the commissioners or topics of discussion? Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Just not really on terms of the priorities, but just remind, and it may have been in the presentation, I just didn't pick it up. 0.1% generate of, in the sales tax now generates how much annually?
So you want to?
Currently, it's somewhere just under $8 million a year. That's countywide.
So we would anticipate that. Do you have any kind of projection as the population grows or what happens with the economy, what that might turn into?
As far as the long-term
Yeah,
revenue?
over the next.
Yeah, that would be
Just
outside
yours.
what I do.
Yeah,
We
okay.
certainly have lots of conversations with our budget office, but predicting the future.
But it's helpful. $8 million a year is the budget for that mix of projects or priorities. Thanks.
Correct, and that's really what we're working from. So our scenarios, we've been developing off the current scenario.
Thank you.
And I know even though that sounds like a lot of money, none of these projects could be finished without grants, federal assistance, state assistance. So you do a great job, Kathleen.
Thank you. Well, it's a team effort with all of us and the communities as well, so thank you.
No. Thank you for all the work you do in our city as well. Oh, there she is.
Councilmember
Hold on,
Peck.
Kathleen. We have Councilor Martin.
Mayor Peck.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I have just one or two questions. You went through the bookend slide kind of fast for me to catch the numbers. Is this extension the low bookend number?
Correct. Yes, it's the low bookend is the current funding level extended at the same amount.
And does the no BRT aspect of this mean that the funding for the bus rapid transit between Longmont and Boulder along 119 is cut, or does that mean that it doesn't happen as fast, or what?
So it means that we have to leverage more of the funding. So we would have the current level of dollars that we have today to invest in the regional corridors. And I'm not sure where to look for the camera, so we wanted to respond. So we would have the same level of funding today. So in order to advance that, we just need to continue to partner and leverage those dollars, continue working with RTD. RTD would be the operator for the bus rapid transit service on the 119 corridor. We had a meeting with them this afternoon, so they would really be the operator for that service, and then these dollars would be used to help augment that. It could be enhancing the station areas, it could be enhancing the first and final mile connections to and from the bus rapid transit stops, for example. So yes, we have to use these limited dollars to do the best we can to leverage the funding from others and to continue to go after state and federal funding together.
Okay, thank you. This does not end the program.
Correct.
Just, I think one important point, that specific slide, that was supposed to be a very small note. That mileage number does not include the BRT services. But it doesn't mean that the BRT, Boulder County, doesn't mean that Boulder County wouldn't contribute to those services.
Thank you for that.
That helps clarify, and we're glad to provide the slides as well if that would be helpful and answer any additional questions as we go too.
I would like the slides in case there are any questions from our residents, or that would be great. Thanks,
Sure.
Kathleen.
Yeah, we'd be glad to. And we're in the process of updating all the information on Boulder County's transportation sales tax webpage. So all the information, the videos, the slides, all of the information will be up there, as well as the draft project list. So that's all in progress.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
So I failed to recognize Tim Swope over here, who's a transportation engineer. Tim keeps the list, as I think of it, all the projects, and he meets with folks like Phil, all the cities, to figure out what are the priorities together, and elected officials through the consortium of cities. And it's, to me, emblematic of the cooperation we have with cities, and Longmont in particular, and that, like the flood. I think the natural disasters, I think of it as a 1-2 punch. It's the flood and then this Marshall Fire. And we just appreciate you doing that with us. So you don't find that a lot of places. And so thanks very much for your work in making that happen. And we look forward to working with you some more.
That thanks goes to our incredible staff. They did a great job.
Same here.
So we're now at first call, public invited to be heard. You have 3 minutes, and if you would state your name and address, that would be great. The first on the list is Kat Bennett.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Kat Bradley Bennett, 5914 Blue Mountain Circle here in Longmont. I'm a Boulder County native, and I've been a bird watcher for more than half of my life, so a few years. I'm here tonight to advocate for those bank swallows over at Rogers Grove. Since the early 1970s, I've participated in annual Christmas and spring bird counts in Boulder County and around Longmont. My spring count area includes the Niwot Trail, and 30 to 40 years ago, my count partner and I could always be guaranteed to find bank swallows nesting in the bank of the Boulder left-hand ditch down there. We haven't seen the birds in that area for more than 20 years. I'm not sure why. It could be too much human interference because the trail is really close to the bank, but they haven't been there for more than 2 decades. Historically, this bird has not been a species of concern, but that's changing, and it's changing rapidly. They are in decline. In Canada, the species is listed as threatened. Habitat loss from development and flood mitigation is the biggest cause for that decline. So after the demanding task of child rearing, our little birds over there are going to endure molting before flying to South America for the winter. Some will go as far as Argentina. This is an arduous journey. Many won't make it back. Survival of the species depends on successful nests year after year. This requires food and reliable habitat. Reliable because they always come back to the same nesting site every year. They need very specific soil strata, the kind laid down by Mother Nature in a nice riparian area. They need a steep grade to the bank, the kind that is carved out by the natural flow of rivers and streams. And ideally, the bank is higher than 10 feet because studies show the higher the bank, the more successful the nests are going to be. So Rogers Grove has all of these in that area where those birds are nesting right now. Bank swallows are so dependent on riparian areas that their scientific name is actually Riparia riparia. So I'm asking you to include in the language of the bond issue coming up tonight that will guarantee the protection of these birds at Rogers Grove. If they return to find that the bank is gone or it's been turned into a concrete channel, they will be unlikely to find a suitable nesting site before the season is done and the next generation is doomed. We have 30 plus nesting pairs. That's anywhere from 60 to 100 adult birds plus babies down there. This is unique in Boulder County. Tonight, their fate is in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. I'm going to call on 3 of you if you want to come up and just sit in the seats. Jamie Simo, Sherry Malloy, and Nadine Lester.
Jamie Simo, 517 Independence Drive. Later this evening, you will be deciding on whether or not to approve a resolution, which would put a ballot measure up for vote in November. This ballot measure would ask voters to approve issuing up to $20 million of storm drainage revenue bonds to finance the completion of the Resilient St. Vrain Project, RSVP, which includes flood mitigation work in City Reach 3, that portion of the St. Vrain between Sunset Street and Airport Road that encompasses Rogers Grove Nature Area. City staff recommends that you approve the ballot language as currently written. However, I and the other members of Stand With Our St. Vrain Creek ask that you revise the language prior to approval in order to add the phrase, "and while preserving the established bank swallow habitat at Rogers Grove," after the words, "without imposing new taxes or increasing existing taxes." We've previously been told that plans to protect the bank swallows are premature, given that there isn't a plan for flood mitigation in the vicinity of Rogers Grove. However, the engineering firm Jacobs prepared a final assessment of several conceptual design options for City Reach 3 back in 2019. Written assurance regarding the preservation of the Rogers Grove bank swallows is necessary, given that the conceptual design options in this assessment, including the city's preferred option of a split flow channel that would run under Hover Street, would almost certainly destroy the nesting habitat for this rare and declining species. As residents of Longmont, we do not want to fund flood mitigation work at the expense of this threatened species, especially since there are undoubtedly other ways to protect the bank swallow nesting habitat while also achieving the objectives of RSVP. I'm not a hydraulic engineer. Therefore, asking me to come up with alternatives to the city's preferred conceptual design is merely an exercise in futility. But I will point out that Longmont owns a not inconsiderable amount of property to the north and east of the bank in which the bank swallows are nesting. If all options are really on the table, then all other options should be exhausted before deciding that the bank swallow habitat at Rogers Grove must be sacrificed. In closing, I must correct what appears to be a misconception held by some city officials that FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, creates flood mitigation designs, that they created designs for Longmont, and that these designs are set in stone. FEMA has guidelines for doing flood mitigation, but it doesn't do actual design. It is a federal agency that provides resources for municipalities to pursue funding, design plans, etc., based on their own community's needs. As stated on its website, FEMA works with federal, state, tribal, and local partners to identify flood risk and update flood maps. In addition, because flood risks change, FEMA floodplain maps can be revised, which is what the completed RSVP is intended to do, remove 800 plus acres of land from the 100-year floodplain per current FEMA floodplain maps. If a community or property owner disagrees with FEMA's flood risk determination, or if construction or flood mitigation work changes flood risk, FEMA's flood risk determination can either be appealed or a letter of map change can be submitted, which FEMA will review and either accept or deny. Therefore, the conceptual design options I referred to above absolutely can, and above all should, be revised to protect the bank swallows. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Sherry.
Sherry Malloy, 1632 Sherman Way. Stand with our St. Vrain Creek supporters and our residents wearing green tonight who advocate for Longmont policy and practices that reflect good stewardship of our public investment that aligns with our core values to protect habitat and the wildlife it supports. Our priority right now is saving our Rogers Grove bank swallows as you decide the ballot language for flood mitigation funding from Sunset to Airport. Right now, tonight, these threatened bank swallows are caring for and feeding their babies. We had 30 people at our bird walk to view these birds on Sunday. People like and care about this stuff. Every survey the city does demonstrates the importance residents place on preservation of our natural amenities. This makes sense as nature has tremendous value for our health and well-being. Just a 15-minute walk in nature improves mental health, including memory and concentration. Stress and anxiety are reduced and depression decreased. Physical health is improved through lowered blood pressure and improved immune systems. Being in natural areas and viewing wildlife feels good and is good. We need nature, and she needs us to protect and respect her. Stan started a postcard campaign asking council to protect our bank swallow colony as mitigation gets funded and designed. People really want to sign these postcards, so we're going to keep giving them this opportunity. Right now, we have just over 300 filled out. We will present all to you on September 6th, just before the final ballot language is submitted for the election. Tonight, we are requesting that you include one phrase in the ballot measure to save our swallows. The proposed language you're voting on reads, without imposing new taxes or increasing existing taxes, here we want to add, while preserving the established bank swallow habitat at Rogers Grove. Then it goes on, the City of Longmont shall be authorized to borrow up to $20 million and so on. We understand and support the need to continue with flood mitigation funding and implementation. We have no issue with the big publicly funded price tag. We're okay with the unavoidable disruption that will result when this section is under construction. We realize this area is going to look and feel very different from what we've come to enjoy and appreciate. All we're asking is for assurance that our public money will not be used to destroy this habitat, as is certain if the Army Corps design is adopted after funding is secured. There is ample open space land on the north side of the creek and Rogers Grove on the south side for alternate plans that would avoid wiping out our swallows. Let me be clear, we want to vote for this ballot measure. We just need language that upholds our values included. Including this protection language is a triple win: a likely election win for mitigation funding, a win for the bank swallows, and a win for public trust in our local government. Thank you.
Nadine Lester.
Mayor Peck and Longmont Council members, good evening. I'm Nadine Lester, 1517 Mayfield Lane. Are you willing to stand with the people of Longmont to protect our town's nature area at Rogers Grove? I'm asking you because about 30 tax-paying members of the community stood up with me at Rogers Grove this past Sunday morning, where birding experts showed us the nesting site of Longmont's only bank swallow colony. On Sunday morning, they thanked Stand With Our St. Vrain for organizing the Save Our Swallows viewing event, and these same neighbors asked us to continue speaking up on their behalf. That's why I'm here. It's kind of amazing that we still have bank swallows along the St. Vrain at all, but because there hasn't been any unwise development at or near Rogers Grove, Longmont's bank swallow colony remains. We all know change is ahead in the form of flood mitigation for this area, but destroying the bank swallow habitat in the process is not inevitable. There were people in attendance on Sunday who talked about effective flood mitigation projects that also preserve wildlife habitats. These kinds of projects result when floodwater experts work together with conservationists to build sustainable hybrid flood controls that include natural buffers and minimize gray engineered infrastructure. There are nature-respectful strategies out there. Longmont has a Parks, Public Works, and Natural Resources Department. We've got a land program administrator, an environmental sustainability planner, a natural resources planner, experts who know about flood risks, FEMA maps, federal flood mitigation standards, and wildlife monitoring. Let's ask them to find the right design for flood control at Rogers Grove, a design that will protect the bank swallows. But why bother? Because we also have an alert population who want their voices heard when it comes to protecting nature on our public lands. Some are newcomers, some have lived here a long time, all taxpayers with love of natural outdoor spaces in common. And the truth is, everyone in Longmont benefits when the community can trust you, our local government, to understand our concerns and to act on the priorities of regular folks outside the business community. So City Council, stand with us tonight. Direct city staff to amend the ballot language so that we protect bank swallow habitat while we fund and design storm drainage systems. Of course we can work with nature to defend against floods. Do we have the will and the energy to do it? Don't undervalue Longmont's existing treasures like the bank swallows. Tonight, amend this ballot language to protect them here in our common home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nadine. If I can have Ruby Bowman, Marion Peppemeyer, and Julia O'Brien, I'm sorry, I mispronounced that. Come up, please.
Hi, Ruby Bowman, 1512 Left Hand Drive. There are three issues I would like to address this evening regarding the storm drainage bond. One, City Council should make it abundantly clear to the public that the storm drainage bond is not free. On October 26, 2021, City Council approved an increase of the storm drainage fee, a fee that appears on our monthly utility bill and one that I and other customers have to pay each month. Staff told you in the August 24, 2021 communication memo that one of 5 major factors influencing the fee increase was a funding need of $2,016,000 for 2 years of debt service payments on a storm drainage bond issuance for the Hover Reach. The ballot language phrase, without imposing new taxes or increasing existing taxes, is misleading, and it makes it seem as if the bond didn't require additional money from residents to fund it. The Storm Drainage Fund is an enterprise fund. Enterprises can't levy taxes, so the phrase seems out of place in the ballot language. User fee increases can be imposed to collect more revenue for an enterprise, and that's what Council did. You approved a storm drainage utility bill fee increase last year to fund the Hover Reach storm drainage bond. Council should include a phrase in the ballot language informing residents you are charging them more on their utility bills to pay for the bond. It's important to be transparent. 2, originally the storm drainage bond was going to be $15 million, but it's up to $20 million now. Where will the city find extra money to cover the cost of servicing $5 million additional debt? Will programs that were supposed to be funded with the storm drainage fee increase be cut entirely, such as rebates on storm drainage rates for low-income households? This needs to be clarified. 3, the ballot language must include assurances that the city will preserve bank swallow habitat in Rogers Grove. I don't want my money I pay on my utility bill facilitating the destruction of bank swallow habitat, which, by the way, survived the 2013 flood. Since the 1990s, bank swallow populations have declined by 95% due to development and flood mitigation. My decision to vote for the bond will depend on whether the city makes a commitment in the ballot language to preserve the bank swallow habitat in Rogers Grove. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. Marianne?
Marion Peppelmeyer, 3030 Spruce View Court, Columbus, Ohio. I am the daughter of Marion Pierce Hopgood, who was killed the night of November 1st, 1955, when United Airlines Flight 629 exploded over beet fields in Weld County, Colorado. A man put a bomb on the plane to collect insurance for his mother. My father was only 31 years old and left my mother with one child and one on the way, which was me. It would only be 42 years later that I finally heard my mother's story from her viewpoint, from her perspective. Her story began my healing of finding my father. But I am here today after 66 years to turn such evil tragedy and trauma into a day of thanksgiving for all the unsung heroes from your community in Longmont. Hundreds of Weld County and Longmont residents exhibited much bravery, courage, and compassion in the efforts to recover the bodies, search for survivors, and assist authorities in any way they could. Your community rose to the occasion and displayed untold American spirit, courage, and heroism. After the explosion, I said hundreds came on the scene. They worked with the FBI, Civil Aeronautics Board, but no survivors were found among the wreckage. The beauty is that local businesses also rallied to exist. Some provided sandwiches around the clock, while others, like the Longmont American Legion, served coffee around the clock to the 500 citizens that were on that field working that night. The phone company ran extra lines just for communication purposes, and generators were brought to light the eerie and dark field. The Greeley Armory, for example, was turned into the morgue where the bodies were placed. The scars of traumatic memories of the stench of this tragedy would have had to linger for years among these heroes, as well as the families like mine who lost their loved ones. Someone on that field found my father, covered him, and transported his body to Greeley Armory. Therefore, in conclusion, words cannot express my gratitude to all the people who rallied their strength and fortitude that night. The residents of present-day Weld County and Longmont have a good heritage, and their unsung heroes of yesteryear have left a legacy of bravery, kindness, and the American spirit. While they may not be alive today, may their courage remain a testimony to what makes America, America, and that is her people. May their spirit live on within their families and communities, inspiring all of us to be brave, courageous, full of love and compassion for one another. Thank you for allowing me to come and publicly give a very long overdue thanks and tribute to Longmont. I would like to suggest in the future, and I'd be willing to help, a proclamation of Thanksgiving to all of your unsung heroes, fire departments, police, sheriff departments to be issued on November 1st, and also in memory of the 44 persons killed on Flight 629, and forever turn such an evil travesty into a day to honor community heroes, both past and present.
Thank you, Mary
so
Ann.
much.
Thank you. Julie O'Brien.
Hello, I'm Julie O'Brien, Mayor, Councilman. Okay. There once you wanted to go. All right, thank you so much. This issue is regarding the public safety at Central Elementary School. Pardon me. We live across the street from Central Elementary and have been watching the quick-moving traffic and also noticed some nonsensical traffic signage at the school. Central Elementary is surrounded by 4 streets, which creates a unique hazard in itself. Signage is apparent, although it's quite misleading on 2 sides of the school and relatively absent on the other 2 sides of the school. Our main issue would be the confusing signage on Gay Street and also on 5th Avenue. These signs announce flashing school speed zones, while completely directly, across the street signage is the end of school zone. We have elementary school students and their parents and their little siblings with them in hand. It's confusing, this video, pictures, to see it right now without actually going and circling the school and actually seeing what's going on. But I think by this glance, you might be able to understand what we are addressing here. School starts August 17th, and I'm hoping that some of these issues might be addressed prior to the students returning back to school. And here you have the signage. You have the school here, 5th, Bross, 4th, and Gay. You have a speed zone here. Directly across the street is a end of school. This is in between the street on 5th where the students are crossing. Over here you have a speed zone. On here, this is the end of speed zone. Here you have a end of speed zone on 4th and Gay. This is coming off of 3rd. It's a flashing light. This is on 5th. End of school zone, directly across the street from a flashing school zone. Here again. What do drivers do? What do students do? What do parents do? I'm not sure. Here is the school, and less than 75 feet is the end of school zone. Here's your flashing school zone. Over here is your end of school zone, and here is the school. It appears that these signs, the end of school, were put in between the years of 2007 and 2012. This is 4th, which there's virtually no signage whatsoever announcing any type of speed. This was taken today. The end of school zone signs between 2007 and 12, when they were placed, they were, I think, just placed in the wrong location without thought. So I'm just hoping that these youngsters that are walking to the school that's surrounded by four streets, they're coming in and out of cars, and when you've got a flashing light saying to slow down, and right across the street, you're allowed to go at any speed.
Thank you, Julie. I see Jim Angstead in the back. There he is, raising his hand. Julie, Mr. Angstead in the back is the one that would probably give you some answers at some point. There he is. He would be the one.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to remove this.
Ralph Groswald. Okay, thank you. And Strider Benston.
Thank you. Strider Benston, 9
51 West 17th. We are the stories we tell, and it was really important to hear Marion and her story. I think the first time I ever spoke in this room, I spoke about transportation, about having a grid bus system, and starting to incrementally build up a electrical city fleet. And 16 years ago, about that time, we had a sustainability conference up at Skyline High School, one of the best, occasions I've ever been aware of. Some of you know my history. I didn't know what history was until I hitchhiked to Alabama and got involved in the civil rights movement. So you might say I learned on the job. And the particular thing at that time, we were fighting for the right to vote. Now that's being stolen from us by all kinds of gerrymandering and state legislators, and they're trying to take away the right to vote for the president by giving it to state legislatures, which are gerrymandered. And the Supreme Court, which we used to honor highly, is decreeing itself to be the legislature now, because the actual Congress is in gridlock by one party that does not believe in discussion or dealing with anything, like abolishing the function of the Environmental Protection Association. Well, the environment is our world. If we don't take care of it, we have nothing, we don't exist. That's what we're dealing with. And the climate and the swallows and every living thing, that is our responsibility. And you guys, I appreciate the roads are better. I can bike. It's safer now than it was 6 months ago to get from one place to another. And I appreciate that, but let's not forget our responsibility, as in the Bible it says stewards of the planet. Let us be stewards of our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Strider. So that ends public invited to be heard. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to step up? Seeing none, I will close public invited to be heard. I would like to ask the counselors, would you mind if I asked David Bell one question before we got out of this section of our agenda? If you're fine. Mr. Bell, I just have one question for you while we're on this topic. Can you tell me, are the engineering designs that are on our website, are they the final designs for the RSVP final reach?
Mayor Peck and council members, I would really like Jim Angst to answer that, but I'll give you what my understanding is the fact that no, they are not. We still have a lot of work to go through, and I think the attention has been brought to this nesting site is something I think our community really wants us to be aware of as we move forward. But as long as I've been involved with the RSVP project for the last 6 years, engineering and environmental services and natural resources work very closely together to try to come up with solutions to do the best to protect people, property, and our natural environment, and oftentimes trying to enhance that. This is going to be some challenges involved, but I think that we have commitment from engineering staff and others that we will look at all those options and be back in front of this body to talk about how we want to proceed forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need to take a bio break? Yes. Let's take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we are back. And we are going to read the consent agenda. Dawn, would you mind reading the items on the consent agenda into the record?
Absolutely, Mayor Peck. The ordinances on this agenda will be on second reading on August 9th, 2022. Item 9A1 is Ordinance 2022-27, a bill for an ordinance submitting to the registered electors of the City of Longmont, Colorado, at a special municipal election to be held on November 8th, 2022, an amendment to the City of Longmont Home Rule Charter to remove outdated language and allow for modernization of the conduct of city business. 9A2 is Ordinance 2022-28, a bill for an ordinance submitting to the registered electors of the City of Longmont, Colorado, at a special municipal election to be held on November 8th, 2022, an amendment to the City of Longmont Home Rule Charter to allow for prospective vacancies in city elections. Item 9B is Ordinance 2022-29, a bill for an ordinance amending sections 2.04.201 through 2.042.214 of the Longmont Fair Campaign Practices Act. 9C is Ordinance 2022-30, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the City of Longmont to amend and consent to assignment of the lease for Vance Brand Municipal Airport Hangar Parcel H18C. Item 9D contains 5 resolutions authorizing agreements between the city and multiple property owners along 17th Avenue for the purchase of real property for sidewalk improvements. 91, Resolution 2022-113, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Russell O'Brien for the purchase of real property at 1516 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Resolution 2022-114, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont, Ian Powell, and Jacqueline Huftel for the purchase of real property at 1550 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Resolution 2022-115, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Belk Model LLC for the purchase of real property at 1716 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Resolution 2022-116, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont, Robert T. Ribbich, and Jennifer L. Jeffrey for the purchase of real property at 1816 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Resolution 2022-117, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Longs Peak Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, Longmont, Colorado, Inc., for the purchase of real property at 2218 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Item 9E is Resolution 2022-118, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Longmont and Platte River Power Authority for Technical Support Services Customer Information System. Resolution 9F, Resolution 2022-119, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and the State of Colorado for grant funding for aquatics. 9G, Resolution 2022-120, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and the State of Colorado for grant funding for child care operations, stabilization, and workforce sustainability. And item 9H is Resolution 2022-121, a resolution of the Longmont City Council submitting a ballot question to the registered electors of the City of Longmont, Colorado, at a special municipal election to be held November 8, 2022, concerning issuing bonds payable from the city's storm drainage enterprise revenues to finance storm drainage capital projects.
Thank you. Councilor Martin, you have your hand up.
Yes, Mayor Peck, thank you. I would like to remove items A1, A2, and B from the consent agenda for discussion.
Thank you. Are there any other items that we need to pull, Dawn?
Mayor, staff would like to pull 9H.
9H. Okay. So can I have a motion? Marcia, do you want to make this motion to approve the consent agenda?
Sure. I move the consent agenda minus A1, A2, B, and H.
Thank you. So it's been moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Waters to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor? Do we have we do. Where is it? I don't have it. I vote yes. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. We do not have any items on second reading, ordinances on second reading and public hearings on any matter, so we're going to go directly to the items removed from the consent agenda. And Marcia, Councilor Martin, I'm going to turn it over to you for the items you pulled.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. First, on A1, I do not have any issues with the substantive changes, but while reading this, I noticed that the words councilmen and councilmen were frequently appearing, and it seems like while we're at it, we could amend this section so that the words were non-gender specific, since it's obvious that our council is non-gender specific at this point.
And to add to that, I noticed that the mayor said his. When you referred to the mayor, it says his.
Good catch. Do we have a second here?
I'll second that. I think you need to make a motion first, though.
Oh, did I move? I move that we replace the words councilman, councilmen, and his when referring to the mayor or a council member with gender neutral terminology.
I'll second that. So that's been moved by Councilor Martins. I seconded that. Let's vote to amend to amend Ordinance A 2022-27 with the correct language. I don't know why I'm not seeing it. No.
So I vote in favor.
As do I. I'm not sure where my voting circles are.
Yep. I vote for it. Councilman Martin voted in favor, so I'm echoing. Does that pass, everyone? So that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Councilor Martin, did he? Oh, okay, thanks, Dallas. So, Councilor Martin, do you want to, you pulled A2, 2022-28.
Yeah, do we need to move adoption of A1 first? Because we only voted to amend it so far.
Go ahead and make the motion.
Yeah, okay, I move adoption of A1 as amended.
I'll second that. So it's been moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by myself to move 2022-27 as amended. All those in favor? I vote yes. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. Councilor Martin, do you want to go to A2?
Yes. And with A2, what I noticed is, again, I agree with the substance of the blue line changes, except that it looks like we have to make the announcement of a proactive resignation 90 days, no more than 90 days in advance of the election, but then the last day to withdraw the announcement is 91 days after, which means that your last day of withdrawing is before your last day of moving. Shouldn't it be the 89th day or the day after, or the 90th day, the day of? I'm just counting on my fingers here. But unless somebody finds a flaw in my logic, I would like to move changing that number from either 90 to from 91 to either 90 or 89 at the discretion of the staff.
I'm not seeing it. Do you, Eugene?
Let me see.
council, the way this works is there is 1 day after the deadline to withdraw for which you can then announce.
Yes, and I understand that, but 91 days is actually before 90 days before the election day. The day after, the last day to do it is 89 days before the election.
I think Councilor Waters would like to weigh in.
And I would think there is actually no magic to these days. We're trying to provide a little bit of buffer between the date of withdrawal and if council wants to change that number, as long as it's before the date by which we have to submit the ballot to the clerk, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't want it to be negative. It doesn't make sense.
Well, I appreciate the work on this. I'm the one that brought the concern up, or brought up the concern.
So
if I was candidate X here and had announced my intent to withdraw or to resign effective election day, say 100 days prior to the election, this suggests that I've got 9 days to rethink that, right, and withdraw my resignation. Once I get past the 91st day, on day 90, I don't have the option. That's the intent of this. I think it reads the way it's intended. That
except that it reads before the date of the election, not after the announcement is made.
Well, if I made my announcement 100 and whatever, whenever I announced a resignation, I could withdraw the resignation up to 91 days prior to the ordinance or prior to the election. After that date, you're locked in. I think that's the intent. I think that's the way it reads.
Yes, that's not the point. The point is that you can announce later than you can withdraw.
Mayor, if I might try to help Don Quintana City Clerk, I believe the 90 days provides, it draws the line in the sand. So you must provide the written notice by 90 days, or you cannot prospectively vacate your seat if you're running for another seat. The 91st day is exactly as Councilmember Waters described, provides a little flexibility should you announce your candidacy and then change your mind for whatever reason. If you come up to the 91st day, you could still withdraw that intent to let go of your seat. But once we reach the 90th day, it's written in stone, if that helps.
Okay, I'm going to withdraw this and talk to the clerk later because everybody's missing my point or else I'm nuts. But we don't need to, it's not important enough to spend the time here. I'm talking about the point of reference being the election day, not the date of the original resignation, which it is in the language. And that means that the numbers are backwards. But I'll withdraw it.
Okay.
It's not that important.
Do you want to move that ordinance then?
Yeah, I move adoption of ordinance, whatever it is.
2022-28.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Been moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Waters. Let's vote. I vote in favor. And that carries unanimously. Councilor Martin, you're up again. You pulled B 2022-29.
Yes, if I haven't muted myself, I'm looking for my Zoom session. Okay, yes. We had a concern expressed by Dr. Waters that some people might wish to use an address that is not an internet address, but is also not a street address for their mailing address. And I did some searching around to see how the combination of a ordinary street address and a post office box is referred to, and the term I came up with is a physical address. So I would like to move that we substitute for street address the word physical address. in that language just to make sure that people who don't want their their home address to be in the disclosures can still satisfy this requirement.
So, is there a second here? So that fails for lack of a second. Councilor Martin? Do you want to move
I actually don't want to move adoption. Okay. Let somebody else do it.
I will move ordinance. Councilor Waters, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I'm gonna propose or move an amendment to Section 5, Paragraph A, 204, 207, the same section that Councilmember Martin was talking about, to after address add or P.O. box. So it would be named street address or the P.O. box of the financial institution used by the committee.
I'll second that. It has the same effect.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Waters and seconded by Councilor Martin to include in the section on Fair Campaign Practices Act to include or a post office box after including. Do you want to read that? I don't have it pulled up. Exactly what it says. Oh, it would be nice if I turned you on.
Number 8 here. The way it reads now is, and then just the finishing that line, and the name and street address of the financial institution by the committee. It would just be street address or post office box of the financial institution.
Okay, so you're just adding the or post office box.
Yes.
Okay, let's vote on that.
Mayor, point of clarification.
Yes.
So street address is used earlier in that paragraph with referring to the person who's contributed 50. Both? Both of them.
Oh, thank you, Eugene. Okay, let's vote on that. And I vote against that. So that passes with Councilor Martin, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, Councilor Waters, and Councilor Yarbrough in favor, and Councilor Hidalgo Faring and myself against. Thank you. And now we would go to 9H. We have a presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the amendment. Councilor Waters, would you like to move that ordinance? I'll second that. All those in favor, let's vote. I'll vote in favor. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So we have Becky Doyle, who is here for the presentation on 9H, a resolution of the Longmont City Council submitting the ballot question on the bond.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Peck and members of council. Becky Doyle, Strategic Integration. We just wanted to affirmatively talk about the change in the dollar amount in that ballot language. When we previously received direction in February about this, we'd been talking about a $15 million bond, but due to the economic pressures that we've experienced around project costs, we think that it would be prudent to make sure that we have those potential inflationary costs to the project covered in our debt authorization. We don't currently have an updated project estimate that brings us to that higher amount, but this is a contingency in making sure that we have that full authorization needed to complete the project.
Okay, thank you for that. I also would like you to address a couple of things. First of all, to one of our residents' comments that this is a new tax and that we need to be transparent about it. From my interpretation, it is not a new tax. This is a tax we voted on in 2021 and through 2024. Is this correct? And we just need now authorization to use those dollars to bond.
Mayor Peck, there's an important distinction between voter authorized tax revenue streams and legislatively adopted user rates. And the storm drainage utility is primarily funded by a fee on our utility bills, which is a utility rate which is legislatively adopted by council. So in 2021, council adopted a 3-year schedule of increases to the storm drainage rate, which supports debt financing at the level proposed.
Thank you for that clarification. My other question is, what are the consequences of adding ballot language outside of what this bond is proposed to do?
In general, we try to separate the questions about project and project delivery from questions about project finance. In this case, a significant amount of the language that's in this ballot language comes really from our bond lawyers. So all that reference to taxes and without imposing new taxes is really about complying with state law, about transparency for TABOR reasons. So maintaining clarity about just the financing question is important and helps us make decisions about project in a way that is really focused on the project and about the financing in the way that's going to be most effective for getting that financing, being able to effectively market the bonds and get the best credit rating possible.
So outside of the ballot language for taxation reasons, what are the consequences, if any, of adding the language about the bank swallows in this bond language?
Mayor Peck, the consequences would really be in the in the marketing of the bonds. So when we go to sell them and the assurances that we make at that time to potential buyers. Eugene's nodding, so I think I got that pretty right.
Well, just the little bit I know about bonds is that we put them out and investors buy these bonds, which is where we get the money to do our project.
That's correct.
So they are investing in what the money for the project is. If you have other language in there, are you saying that the risk of not being able to sell those bonds because of the conflicting language, is that
or potential barriers to successful project completion? Yes.
Okay.
So
Harold?
When you issue the debt and you have requirements in terms of whether you do it, and Jim can jump here and correct me if I'm wrong, if the market thinks that there are potential problems in terms of you're not able to carry out the project because of those restrictions, then that starts impacting all of the things that Becky just talked about. Because they're going to go, well, what happens if you can't design it this way and then you have to move it and it costs more and you're not able to fund the increase? All of those things start coming into play. So it makes it a riskier endeavor when you go into the bond market.
Is it normal to add language in a bond that is different from the actual intent of the bond? Does that happen? I don't want to negatively impact this bond because we absolutely need to sell it in order to do our SVP.
So I'm looking at Jim too because
So I've never seen that type of language.
I haven't either.
I don't know that I could speculate on the prevalence.
Mayor, to answer your question, it's not typical. I'm We're not aware of it. Certainly hasn't happened here in the past. I think, this is all just speculation on my part. So what I would say is that the question, if you complicate this question a little bit, it might make investors a little bit more wary about it. We would probably still be able to sell the bonds. It might be at a higher interest rate because they may not see them as attractive, but they're looking at the ability of the city to pay off the bond, more importantly than they are looking at the project.
Okay, thank you. This needs more thought process. It really does. If in fact we put the language in the bond, but the bond passes with that language in, we're risking not being able to sell the bond and not being able to do our RSV project in a timely manner or with the amount or at a higher cost because of the interest rate, etc. And I am leery about putting that bond at risk because we have to have the money to do this project. So, Eugene.
Mayor, Eugene May, City Attorney, I think we could, as an option, postpone this matter till the next regular session. We can consult with our financial advisors and municipal bond attorney and get their expertise on what they think would be the impact of adding this language.
I think that would be a great idea.
Clearly this is new language that we're just hearing now, and we're not bond experts. We're experienced in issuing bonds, but we have special counsel and financial advisors that are bond experts.
That's a great idea. I am going to move to postpone this bond. I'm sorry, oops. We have 2 more people. I just like talking up here, so I ignored them. So, Councilor Hidalgo-Ferring.
Thank you, Mayor. I would really appreciate if we could have legal counsel with this. But I did write it down the 3 times that 3 different people said it. And, just to make sure that you have the language, it was while preserving the established bank swallow habitat at Rogers Grove. That was embedded between, and I found it on here while they were talking. It was in section 3, line 9. Page 3, without imposing new taxes or increasing existing taxes before the comma, that's where I heard the recommendation of adding, and while preserving the established bank swallow habitat at Rogers Grove. So if there's, as you're talking with legal, what kind of language could we put in there that would offer assurances? Because I know if I wasn't sitting on council and getting all the background information, and this came up as an issue, I probably wouldn't vote for the bond. I'll be honest. And, I want to make sure that this also does pass because we need it. So I feel that passionately about it.
I think there's a couple of issues in play in this conversation. You have the financing component of this, and then you actually have the engineering component.
Harold, could you speak up?
Okay. This mic's not working. It's not working well. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So you have 2 components in this. You have the financing conversation and you have the engineering conversation in this. And so someone asked me the question, well, if we put this in, what would that do to the project? I think chances are it would increase the cost of the project in re-engineering the design because it's not in a place where we own the property because when you look at some of those options, it really is centered on that fairgrounds area. And so just in full transparency, in this time we can relook at the financials on this to see what is the impact in this and what that means in terms of the design. And we can have Josh talk about that. So you have engineering issues on one side and then you have the financing issues on the other side. And I think that's then where the two meet with each other. So if you say we need to issue $20 million in debt, but another option ends up costing $25 million, then you have a financial gap. And so we can pull that information together and kind of give you a sense of that.
Okay, that would be great.
I would further clarify, we have, or we always consider, environmental impacts of projects. An additional concern would be that we're not far enough along in the design process where we have those meaningful alternatives yet to do even the economic analysis of what would the cost of, project A versus project B be. So, and that is something where we can use tools that we have, such as the sustainability evaluation system, to weigh all of the various impacts of potential project alternatives and have that discussion with council about what's a preferred way to go.
Actually, I do have a meeting with David Bell and some of the other folks on this, and the SES was one of the things I was going to bring up. So hopefully we can have those discussions before the next regular session, so we can bring back all the data and all the ideas.
And I think that's the challenge. This is preliminary design.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get into the actual design, that's actually where you start working through those issues. I would say our intent is always to do the best that we can to respect the environment and not impact it in a negative way. But that really comes as you're further down the design road and when you start hitting 40, 50% design on these projects.
Okay. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just wanted to point out, and I think it may be relevant to whether we postpone or not, although I'm not necessarily averse to postponing, but it seems to me that the public has other options for protecting the bank swallow that would not encumber the bond issue. But if they used one of these other mechanisms, like a second ballot measure that was put on by petition, that we could then use the money from the bond issue, but maybe perhaps be forced to seek additional funding to complete the split flow because of the changes. So my point being that this is not the appropriate place for that language, but the language could be put somewhere else. And that would not encumber the city from doing what it needed to do about storm drainage, but could impact the eventual design of the last set of flood mitigations. And what I would like to do is, I have a couple of questions for David and Jim, probably, about bank swallows and the project. And I don't know whether, could we vote first on whether to postpone this and then ask those questions, or would that cause the questions to be saved for later?
I think we could probably save them for later, if you don't mind. Let's decide whether we're going to postpone this and do more research on it, and more research on both ends, the design standard as well as the bond language.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Remind me or remind us of the benefits of this reach. Who and what are who benefits, and what are those benefits a result of the work that's proposed or
Josh,
needed?
you got it? I'm going to let Josh take it.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Josh Sherman, civil engineer with Public Works. Councilmember Waters. The benefits are completing this flood mitigation from Sunset to Hover. Begins to remove the floodplain that is the south bank from Hover down to the railroad tracks. So several hundred acres and several dozen structures, including mobile homes, commercial businesses, industrial areas that are located in that are currently located in the 100-year floodplain.
So if the comments, some of the comments that have been made tonight, Councilmember Hidalgo Faring's comments about the prospects of, or the likelihood that people would vote for or against a ballot question enabling the city to service debt, right, to sell bonds for this project. What hangs in the balance? I don't know that the bank swallows are at risk, but we do have people and their property at risk if we don't. Is that the case?
Yes, that's a fair statement.
Yeah. So there's a number of interests here that we have to weigh, and among those, we have had no conversation tonight about the people in Longmont, who would benefit or not, who would be negatively affected by the decision of the community not to pass a bond. I think personally, trying to solve the problem of bank swallows with language in the bond question is a bad idea. I think we ought to keep the bond question as clean as possible. If we need to come back and do it by resolution, some other action based on what, more to learn about design, then we can always do that. But to complicate the bond question, I think, is a mistake. I think if we do this, we're going to send a real clear signal to the people who would benefit from this, that they fall somewhere below the bank swallows. And I'm not trying to dismiss bank swallows. I care about the environment as well. But I think that's a dangerous message to sell if we care about passing a bond issue. The last question for me would be, let's assume it's going to cost 25. I know that was off the top of your head, but if it either doesn't pass, or we add language that we know is going to increase costs to whatever X is, how likely is it we can service that debt with current rates?
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Waters, we know that rates are designed to service up to $20 million in debt, assuming somewhere near current interest rates, but we would need to do further analysis or potentially unfund other projects or operating costs in order to service additional debt.
So now we're weighing off the values again, the bank swallows against projects we're not going to do. It'll be important for me to know what those are, or increasing rates again without doing less in other areas to service the debt or the cost of the project because of the increased debt we're going to have to service, which is going to affect everybody who pays that storm drainage fee. So I just think those are all things that we have to weigh in this. We've heard a lot about an interest. I think there are other interests we need to be equally as concerned about, and that is the people and the costs, and not just in the floodplain, but everybody who would pay additional rates. So I'd love to see what the designs are. I'd love to see language that would allow us to address that, but not confuse the bond question with that. And if whoever wants to vote for or against the bond, they're going to have to make those decisions. The city will do its best to educate the community. But if we lose the bond, if we put on the ballot with this question and it goes down because folks organize against it, they'll do it knowing what the consequences are for the folks who live in the floodplain, and what their properties are. Is that fair? Or is that accurate, whether it's fair or not?
Is it accurate
that if we keep this current bond language and we lose it because there's organized opposition because we didn't put language in the bond question about bank swallows, then we lose it knowing what the implications are for the people and the properties in the floodplain, and that we still potentially haven't solved any flood mitigation problems or bank swallow issues.
Yeah, if the debt's not approved, we will not be able to proceed with this project, which will keep the areas that Josh identified in the 100-year floodplain. That is a correct statement.
Yeah, thanks.
And that was the point I was trying to make, is that I'm very nervous about it not passing. However, I don't think it hurts, because this is only first reading, to do a little more research on the language. Has this been done before? And if some organization, city, state, put that type of language in a bond, did it pass? Did it work? So I'm sorry to put this more work on you, Eugene, but.
Do you want us to also bring Josh in to talk about the different alternatives?
Yes. I think that would be great. So I don't see anybody else in the queue. I think I'll make this motion to amend, to postpone our 2022-121 until the next regular session and let our staff do the research needed to see if this extra language that we're putting in the bond will work. Okay, so Councilor Hidalgo Faring seconded that. All those in favor? I'll vote for. I don't see her. Oh, there she is. Okay. So that passes with Councilor Waters opposing. So I will also move Resolution 2022-121. Oh, we just postponed it. I thought I moved to amend it, but I did not. Oh, big discussion. All right, now we have one general business item. That is a bill. That is Ordinance 2022-31, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 10.20, Section 10.20.100 of the Longmont Municipal Code on unreasonable noises prohibited, prima facie unreasonable noises.
Mayor Peck, City Council Member Zach Ardith, Public Safety Chief. We have received, since I've been here, numerous complaints on what we would classify as loud vehicles, mufflers, engines, and those types of things. And so we were tasked with, Dave Kennedy's here tonight to give you a presentation on what we believe is a fair but an enforceable ordinance that we're asking council to consider. And so he'll discuss some of the things that we did to look across of how this is enforceable, what we can do as far as sound, noise, and addressing some of the concerns I know that you're receiving almost on a weekly basis. So I'm going to bring Dave Kennedy up, and he's got some information to share with council.
All right, thank you for the introduction, Chief, and thank you, council, for the opportunity to be here tonight. Oh, yep, sorry. PowerPoint would be helpful. Yep, you got it. All right, and is it just the arrow to change it?
It will be.
Okay.
Just a moment so I can share it. And is this your first slide?
That is? Great. Yep, we're good. Thank you, sir. All right, so before we get too deep in the weeds on this, I just wanted to clear up some confusion that we've heard from the community regarding this ordinance. We've heard that there's been some folks in the community who've been circulating a petition regarding vehicle noise, but it's not vehicle noise in relation to engines and exhaust systems, which this is. Okay, so the petitions that have been circulated are people that are upset with vehicle noise that's being emitted by stereos, loud stereo systems. And as you can see, and I'm sorry, the font, and I'm not changing slides here. Right. So, and I apologize that this was a little bit small, but we currently in our ordinance already under Section A have code that addresses this issue. So, I just kind of wanted to pause here and open this up to council for any questions, because I understand there was some confusion regarding what that is and what we're here to talk about today.
Marcia, you have your hand up. Can you hear?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, we're not.
Are you ready to pause for questions?
Not yet, please.
Okay.
Let's let David do his presentation.
Okay, I will continue, Mayor Peck. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next parts of my presentation will be in regards to enforcement and why public safety staff felt that we needed to find a way to increase our enforcement capabilities in regards to vehicle noise. So to understand why enforcement is currently lacking, I will first talk about our existing local ordinance, and then I will talk about previous enforcement efforts that were made under the state statute regarding modification of mufflers. So after that, I will go into our sound meter reading results and how we came to the conclusion that 300 feet should be the distance. And then I will end the presentation with public safety's education and enforcement plan, should this pass. All right, looks like we're good to go now. So first, our local ordinances. Enforcement of motor vehicle noise currently falls under 10-20-110. So 110 is a separate section of the code. Our proposed change is under 10-20-100. So 110 is where the ordinance regarding maximum sound pressure levels resides, and thus the need to use a sound meter to determine decibel level compliance. So our first challenge in all of this is the fact that, first of all, public safety doesn't have the equipment that we need. We don't own a sound meter. If we do purchase sound meters, this would require specialized training for our officers, not only on how to use the device, but also on the code, which honestly at times can be confusing to remember in the moment. There are 6 different maximum pressure levels that are defined based on different zonings and different times of days. It's all broken down between residential, commercial, industrial, and then times of day or daytime and nighttime that are defined as being between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. So fortunately, code enforcement does own a sound meter, and Dane was gracious enough to lend that to me. So when we first started exploring options, you know, I took the meter with me out on patrol, and what I found is that I was rarely in the position to have that noise meter in hand and ready to read the decibel level when I observed a violation. And really the reasoning behind that is that it has a lot to do with just the nature of our business. When we're on patrol, you know, even though we try to get out of our cars and be in more personal contact with the community, the nature of our business is oftentimes, more often than not, we're behind the wheel of a motor vehicle. So we cannot take sound pressure level meter readings while driving a vehicle, of course, because we're inside, especially on a hot day like today. It's July. My windows are up and the air conditioning's cranked, right? But yet we still wanted to find a way to solve the problem that we were seeing. And the problem that we're seeing is as we're driving around the streets, you know, for example, I might see a motor vehicle that's 6 blocks away from me, and the exhaust that it's emitting is just so egregiously loud that I can hear it with my windows rolled up and the air conditioning blasting. So that was kind of what we set forth to solve, was that right there. So how can we take the sound meter out of the equation really kind of became the question. Because we felt that if we could do that, officers are more likely going to be able to take enforcement action when they see that egregiously loud vehicle. Let's talk a little bit about the state statute. So we did have previous enforcement efforts under the state statute. I tried my best to remember the year that we did this, but all I can remember is that it was quite some time ago. And what we found is that this statute as well just wasn't effective. So this state statute specifically addresses mufflers not originally installed on vehicles. Basically what the statute says is that you're not able to put a new muffler on a vehicle that somehow amplifies or increases the noise beyond the factory original factory original settings, I'm sorry. So the first challenge we found with this ordinance, first of all, is that most officers simply just don't possess the mechanical skills necessary to determine if a muffler on a vehicle is factory or modified. You know, honestly, I'm not a gear guy. I'm not a gearhead. I can't just look at the back of a vehicle and determine whether or not that's a new muffler or came off the factory looking that way. Second challenge is, and we do have some officers who do possess those skills, not many, but in order for those officers who do possess those mechanical skills, what we found with those previous enforcement efforts is those officers were literally needing to crawl under vehicles in order to gain the evidence that's needed to prove a violation of the statute. The reason being is that, you know, you're not able to view the serial number, the make and model number of a muffler from just looking at the rear of the vehicle. You have to actually get up underneath there and take a look at it. And we were looking for other evidence of things like new, installation being fresh tooling marks and welds and things of that nature. So the conclusion public safety came to at that time is that we were not going to recommend that officers continue risking their safety by crawling underneath motor vehicles for something that, honestly, at the end of the day, this is a traffic infraction. So we gotta weigh the seriousness of the offense versus the safety risk, and it just wasn't there. The third challenge after that previous enforcement campaign too that we ran into, and I remember when the conversation changed with people when we were pulling them over, is that initially we were getting some admissions from the folks that we were stopping that they had modified their mufflers, but this community of people who were not willing to comply, who weren't willing to bring their vehicles back into thresholds that are law-abiding, figured out pretty quickly that all they had to do is tell law enforcement that, oh, that's the original muffler, or that's the way I bought it from the dealer. There were all these stories surrounding them not being the ones that modified it, and thus it kind of took away our probable cause for a criminal case. Really, the only thing we're left with as far as enforcement of this statute would be somebody to be able to, just be honest and give a full admission of wrongdoing, which was quite honestly rare. So between the two things that we have, the two tools we had, we didn't have a lot, and that's why enforcement was lacking. So when we look at the existing language, once again, for our ordinance that we have, you can see in sections A through D that 25-foot distance is something that's commonly throughout the code for all these different types of noisy events that you can see up here on the screen. I'm not going to go through each one specifically. So when we first started down this road, we started, and I'll be honest with you, we started with 25 feet, but after much discussion, we all came to the conclusion that that's just too close of a distance when we're talking about vehicle noise. And so when we first tabletop this discussion, and we came up with a hypothesis, and that's really what it was. It was a hypothesis at the time of what would be a reasonable distance. And we came up with 150 feet. So that was the first distance that we had, was that 150 when we first went out on the town and started taking those noise measurements around town. But what we found out is that initial hypothesis of 150 feet was wrong, because at 150 we were still seeing some pretty significant spikes in the noise meters when standing at that distance from the roadways. But when we backed that meter up to 300 feet is when we started seeing that the meter, for the most part, was just starting to flatline. In other words, we were at the point where we were starting to get into the ambient noise level of the neighborhood. And to kind of further into this too, and not to get too far deep into physics and science, but the only way to truly find out if your measurements and your hypothesis are correct or incorrect is to kind of look towards science, right? And so, first of all, let me talk a little bit about the initial noise meter readings. So you can see that we needed a baseline measurement near the roadway, so we started at 10 feet just because 10 feet is a safe distance to stand from a roadway. And what we found is that we were getting noise measurements of anywhere between 75 and 85 dB. So on average, I would say that the average was closer to 75 to 80 dB. That 85 dB was along the Ken Pratt extension, Ken Pratt Boulevard extension, where the concrete roadway is, its concrete speeds are higher. And so that was the highest measurement we were able to use. And so we stuck with it, right? It's the highest one we could find. And we didn't just do measurements there, just so everybody's clear on where we did take measurements around town. So we started with the 3 major highways in town, and we also included Hover Street. The reasoning behind this is that these roadways are capable of producing the most noise because they have higher speeds and heavier volume. So once again, back to testing that, testing our findings, testing that hypothesis. So in the science of sound, we learned about the inverse square law, as you can see there on the screen. What that means briefly is bullet point number 3, and that is the fact that sound decreases exponentially every time it is doubled. So it decreases 6 dB. So in order to understand dBs, and if somebody would have told me, 5 months ago that 75 dB, 85 dB, that means nothing for me. So to help council kind of visualize what is 75 dB. So 75 dB is not a noise that is really loud, but it's a noise that you would have to raise your voice slightly to have a conversation with somebody. So imagine yourself standing next to maybe, somebody playing like a grand piano, and how loud you might need to speak next to that person playing the piano. So that's about 75 dB. So 85 dB it's actually a tenfold increase, so it's significantly louder. So it's more along the lines of like a gas-powered leaf blower. We've all heard those obnoxiously loud things, right? Usually when you're trying to sleep. And 85 dB is not only so loud that you're probably going to have to yell over it to have a conversation, but if you have prolonged exposure to 85 dB, it's actually going to cause hearing loss. So it's pretty loud. But applying that, very loud noise at 85 dB at 10 feet, when you do the math on the inverse square law, and I didn't include the specific math equation here for you, but it comes out to 55 dB at 300 feet. And you can see there at the 150 foot, we were at 61.5 dB, which was why we were seeing those, spikes in the noise meter. And that's why our 150 feet initial thought was wrong. So all that said to say that at 300 feet, we're getting down into the daytime level for a residential neighborhood, which is set forth in code as an existing code is 55 dB. So one more thing too I want to mention regarding decibel levels, because we have had some comments regarding this already too, is that some people have asked, so how loud in the United States is a vehicle allowed to be when it comes off the manufacturing line? So doing some online research, what I found is that per federal guidelines and EPA regulations, a vehicle is not allowed to be any louder than 80 dB. So 80 dB is less than the 85 we're already plugging into this equation. And by the way, the 80 dB, that's not just for vehicles. That includes cars, pickup trucks, and yes, even Harley-Davidson motorcycles and even the Tesla. So every manufacturer has to comply with that 80 dB. So we've heard some comments from the motorcycling community with concerns regarding their loud pipes. You've heard the motto before, loud pipes save lives, and that is true. But if their motorcycle is coming off the Harley-Davidson production line at 80 dB, it's never going to violate what we're proposing here, because it's always going to be below the daytime residential neighborhood 55 dB level based on our measurements. So just real quick too, an added bonus that we found too, and this is more for our staff, is that 300 foot's just an easy to remember distance. It's a length of a football field, right? 100 yards is 300 feet. So we can all conceptually visualize in our heads what a football field might be. And that's going to help just the average patrol officer when they are out on patrol. They're going to be asking themselves, is that potential violation I just observed more than a football field's length away from me? And that'll help them in their decision whether or not they should stop that vehicle or not. So lastly, I just want to touch real quick on our education and enforcement plan. So should this ordinance pass, we will work with our Longmont communications team on an education campaign utilizing a wide variety of different social media platforms and outreach efforts to reach our community. And we also do plan that before we start issuing citations, we are going to incorporate a period of time in which warnings will be given. So this does conclude my PowerPoint. I am open to any questions council members may have of me or Chief Artist at this time.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Yes, I have a question. First of all, I want to say that this ordinance is really clever. It's very well thought out. I love the math. I love the thinking in terms of the way it's going to be perceived and enforced by officers patrolling in automobiles. Everything about it is just right for Longmont's needs, except for one thing, and that is, in fact, the understanding of car stereos versus amplification equipment in houses and businesses, because the amplification equipment in houses and businesses is stationary, and the existing ordinance about measurable at 25 feet is fine for that. However, a stereo in a an automobile on the street is more like a muffler than it is a stereo in a house in terms of the level of disruption it can create when you've got speakers popping in a car rolling down the street. So I would like to move that we amend this to add stereos as one of the car stereos as one of the list sources of vehicle noise. You've got engine noise in there, you've got exhaust system noise in there. Just put sound systems in there and it'll be perfect. And the same 300 feet will apply, and it doesn't have any effect at all on the existing ordinance about stationary amplified noise. So I think that would satisfy Mr. Johnson and his petitioners without detracting from the ordinance in any other way. Nobody cares. Okay.
Okay, that's been moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring to add stereo noise to this ordinance. Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. David, just react to that from an enforcement perspective.
So under Section A of 1020-100, we currently have any type of amplified noise. Basically, it's a blanket section in the statute. So it covers all different situations, not just vehicles. Councilmember Martin, mentioned houses and things of that nature being a problem. We could certainly go that route. I guess it's more council's direction on, do we modify A and put it there, or do we include it as somehow needing to be increased out to a distance of 300 feet? Because that's essentially what we're doing. We're moving it from 25, where it's currently covered in subsection A, and if we write it into E, E is for 300 feet.
If I could clarify, I think you leave A the way it is because that's a stationary source of amplified noise, and you also add vehicle stereos as a source of vehicle noise in E.
Well, my real question, my concern is about enforcement, and I'm comfortable with whatever we can enforce and prosecute. So at some point in time, it'll be helpful to hear from Eugene how many noise ordinances, we expect there to be greater enforcement here. How many noise violations do we prosecute now, or have we prosecuted in the last year? How many more might we because of this? And what are we not gonna, what's gonna drop off the list for prosecutors if we're gonna prosecute more noise ordinances? So first about enforcement, then Eugene, if you could just speak to the judicial side of this, it'd be helpful.
So we did meet with our legal team regarding this language that was written in, and as well as our city prosecutor, Mr. Ranhell. And so we did work with our legal team on this and made sure that we were in, where we needed to be for enforcement on this. Yes, with what you were seeing on the initial PowerPoint, that's correct.
Councilmember Martin's motion.
I can't hear either of you, please.
I think the question is, Councilmember Martin's motion, that probably hasn't been vetted through legal staff.
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah, sorry for the confusion, Councilmember Waters.
Mayor and council, I'm just thinking stereo is amplified sound. And so it seems like we'd have two standards. I think that the current amplified sound provision is not just stationary. I mean, I don't see in the ordinance where that talks about it being stationary. It just
I see you, Marcia.
Speaks to source of the said sound or within a private residence. And then in terms of prosecution, I have not talked to Rod about how many or what challenges there are for prosecuting these types of violations. David, maybe help me. It seems like you get a noise complaint, you show up, you tell them to turn it down, and they turn it down.
For the most part, that's correct. Yep.
And that it doesn't get to the stage of actually ticketing somebody. But I can follow up with Rod on that and have that information. This is a general business item, so not a first reading. We're taking input. We'll huddle up afterwards and come back with things that we think will address council's concerns.
Councilor Yarbrough?
Is she speaking?
Okay, there we go. Ooh, that was loud. Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just have a question about what forms or what ways are you thinking about educating the community about the 300 feet? And I know you had mentioned about educating. So in what ways are you planning on educating the community? And because even if we did, if we approve this, I do want to make sure that they have a clear understanding, because it just seemed like a lot of times the community really don't know what the law is about that,
Well, and this is something that, we honestly lean hard on our marketing team for. They really are the experts when it comes to social media platforms. And, some thoughts that in some discussions we've already had regarding this too, is that what are some alternative locations too, right? Where, say you don't want to get your vehicle into compliance because you like to street race, for example. So part of the education campaign can include, okay, where can you legally do this? So places like Bandimere Speedway, they have public racing nights where you can just show up with your car and race all you want, be as loud as you want, right? So it's offering alternative solutions too to people who do want to modify vehicles and make them fast. We understand that's a hobby, that's a sport for a lot of people. And so we also want to give them some local venues to go ahead and be able to still practice that, but do it legally, because we've seen quite a few, incidents of illegal street racing recently, and not just in the city limits, but in the outskirts of the city surrounding us. So, I think, and this is, it's obviously an overgeneralization, but I think for the most part we're dealing with a younger crowd here. And that's why I really need to lean on this marketing team for that social media platform. I'm old, so I use Facebook, and people call me a boomer, that are my 16-year-old's age, right? We need to put the information where people of that generation are going to see it and read it and be able to get educated, like you said. We need to start looking at other platforms like Snap and, things of that nature. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I was just wondering how we're going to reach that part of the community. Yep. And I also think if there's some kind of way we can let the car, like AutoZone and, all those other places where they sell auto parts, right? We have to think outside the box. And then maybe also where cars sit in parks, in the parking lot, where they're showing off their cars and things like that. So I just wanted to know how are we getting the message across to our community, and especially our younger community who are not on Facebook. Yeah, exactly. And so I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback.
Well, and so, SNAP has actually been an issue we kind of struggle with too, because it doesn't save it. It creates other issues for us from a governmental standpoint. But I think what we're really finding is when you're really communicating, it was Instagram, now it's Snap, and so really those two platforms and how we can get into those. I think it's auto part stores, automotive locations, where folks go to get some of this. I mean, you've got to try to get at every location you possibly can.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I think first of all, do we not have a motion on the floor? And I would just like to say once again that the point is whether an officer can pull over a car whose stereo, I mean, I just had this experience last month. So I was pulled up next to a car with my air conditioner on and my windows up, and about 3 blocks away, I started having seriously, the side panels of my car were vibrating on the bass beat from the stereo of this car. And when I pulled up next to him, I could tell what car it was. And to me, that is the exact same violation that Mr. Johnson is talking about. And it is just as egregious a noise violation that is detected by officers in exactly the same way as a modified exhaust system. And that's my reason for adding that to item E on engine noise. It's completely different from a stationary source of amplified sound, and much more like a modified exhaust system. If we need to tweak the language so that it's not ticketable, he just has to turn this volume down on his stereo, that's fine. But it should be something that an officer can do, can enforce, and if somebody refused it, then they should get a ticket.
So we have a motion on the floor. Let's vote. It is to add stereo noise to section, was it section A?
E.
E, section E. Let's vote. We're not voting on that yet.
Wait a minute. I couldn't hear any of that.
Yes. So that carries with Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez in opposition. So I do have a question. It's not public invited to be heard yet, Brian. I'm sorry, we're discussing it at this point. So my question, and it does have to deal with the 300 feet. When you are going downtown that is less than 300 feet for the stores, for the restaurants. When you are in a residential neighborhood, that is less than 300 feet. How do we deal with that? That is really the crux of this whole conversation, I think.
And I think it's not just this section that we're proposing to add. So one interesting thing about 102100 is when you look at the header of the wording prior to the subsections, is that this ordinance requires a person, and I think Chief Artist has it here for me. So it requires a person of ordinary sensitivity, significant annoyance or irritation. So that's part of the case. So it's not just law enforcement, but sometimes, depending on what the case facts are, but sometimes it can be me contacting the complainant, and the standard of proof in court is going to be that my complainant is a person of reasonable sensitivities, right? And in this case of downtown, maybe that would be somebody who was inside of a restaurant, dining at the time, right? We could use that person as a witness to the case to say that, it's not just covered under any other section, but we're going to bring that person now into court too. And it's going to be put to the litmus test, right? The judge is going to have to decide if that person's complaint was reasonable or unreasonable. That's going to be part of it. But I think if you have that in addition to law enforcement seeing evidence of a crime, then I think it's just more to add to it. I hope that answered your question, Mayor Peck.
Yeah, but I can see that being thrown out very easily. And it also makes the complainant have to identify the car, first of all. And
these they all present themselves in so many different ways. I've had complaints where it's more a neighbor-to-neighbor complaint, right? Than one neighbor's complaining that somebody starts their very loud exhaust vehicle up every morning at 5 in the morning on their way to work, for example. So that could be another just example of what we see in law enforcement that we may end up using some other neighbors too. Maybe we start asking the neighbor across the street, does this bother you? Because that's the person who never called us to begin with, right? So we do get creative when it comes to not just law enforcement being the ones taking these cases forward, but also being like in Councilmember Martin's example. I think a person of ordinary reasonable sensitivities, if they were on the jury and hearing the facts of the case that Councilmember Martin presented regarding being in her vehicle with the windows up and the air conditioning on and the noise still blaring inside of her vehicle, that's an intrusion into her space, and it's an intrusion into her quiet enjoyment of her personal space. And I think that the judge would most likely rule in favor of that.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Thank you, Officer Kennedy. I think that was a good presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
So this is obviously zero reading. But you all
correct.
made a decision on what to add to it. I'm assuming you all want us to bring this back for first reading.
I don't know. What do you think? Any comments? Do we want this to come back for first reading, Councilor Waters?
I'm fine with bringing it back. I just want to know that we're not passing another ordinance that we're not going to enforce or prosecute. That's so when we get there, for me, that's the question. I do think I've had a concern. Part of it goes back to Mr. Johnson's concerns with Dutch Bros when they moved in. That you look at that ordinance and what we're doing with it, and we're just not enforcing it. So why? So if this makes it more enforceable, I'm down with that, because I think then I want to know we're going to enforce it, and on the judicial side we're going to prosecute it.
I don't think it addresses the problem that was brought up. That is my concern. Is that it's not what we discussed in executive session. I just don't think it's going to go anywhere, even if you go to court. It's putting too much emphasis on what the individual resident has to do to stop this, rather than all of the noise on downtown, through the downtown section. I don't know. I'm not convinced it'll make any difference.
So I think part of this, I'm going to need some help on this one. I think that part of it does a couple of things. I think it makes it easier to enforce because the officer's not dependent on decibel level readings. Now, that's one piece. The other piece, I think, in terms of what we talked about when we talked about fireworks and other things, whether the officer sees it and they're not responding to another call or something else, that obviously is always going to impact when and what they can enforce based on whatever's happening at that point in time and the severity of the calls. I think that was part of what they tried to achieve in this. I think we do have some concerns. That's what we were talking about here on the 25-300 foot, because I think that actually may have the opposite effect of what we were trying to achieve on this one. And so I think we need to talk about that. I think it may make it harder for us to enforce by going out to 300 versus keeping it at 25. And so we need to figure that out too, but we were just trying to distill what we heard and figure out, are we achieving what we want, what you all want to achieve?
I see. Councilor Martin. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor Peck. I have a relevant story, which is that I had a long meeting, and I thank them for your patience with Chief Artis, and now I understand Chief Satter. It was talking about this ordinance, because what I was trying to do was say, what are we going to do about street racing on I have, several streets in my ward where, the people were complaining. I haven't heard any this summer, but last summer, people were really, really disrupted by street racing and modified exhaust systems. And the people on the force were really excited about this ordinance because what it meant was that that a patrol officer could enforce a modified exhaust system just the way they could speeding or anything else without instrumentation, just because an improper lane change, just because an officer on patrol could hear it and know that it was in violation without using any instruments. And they really felt that it was going to make them able to do a good job of enforcing violations that were hard to detect and hard to prove under the existing ordinance. And so, their enthusiasm and their understanding of what they would do with this ordinance is the reason that I am in favor of it. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, so Councilor Martin's in favor of bringing this back on first ordinance. Can I hear from the rest of you, please? Do you want to bring it back? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'm skeptical that this would really have a measurable effect. I just don't see the enforceability being that strong, but I'm not the expert in that matter, and I'll take the word of our public safety department that they feel that this is enforceable. I think that the questions raised by Councilmember Waters are very much akin to my own. I think that we've passed enough ordinances that I'm not seeing enforced regularly for a variety of reasons, and so I don't want to add to that list. But I'm happy to bring this back for debate, and also, ideally some further information to clarify some of the concerns raised.
So it looks like you have your direction. I'm still concerned about the downtown. It's impossible to eat outside. It is, and 300 feet is not. And to have the person sitting at the table having to be the one that calls in, has to go to court. I mean, they just want to eat dinner. We need to discuss that. How do we do that? How do we enforce it? Is it signage? Is it? So I would like to discuss that part of it further. So if that's all, we can go on to the next thing that is on the agenda. Do you have direction? All right. Councilor Hidalgo-Ferring.
So then, just kind of, I'm trying to process this as well, but really, it sounds like we're not ready for a first reading. We need to have another general business on this topic.
Councilor Waters, did you want to bring it back on first reading?
If it doesn't come back on first reading, if we were going to bring this back as a general business item, then I think the conversation ought to be, what we ought to do is be real clear on what problems we're trying to solve.
Okay.
And what are the best ways to solve them. Because I appreciate the work that Officer Kennedy and the rest of public safety did. But I'm not certain getting into the details of, and the math, and the science, which is all fascinating. The more fundamental question is, or understanding is that we have problems in a number of areas, from Main Street to what Mr. Johnston has experienced to what residents of Ward 1 have experienced with the Ford dealership and their voice-activated security system. All different, right? that all probably need something that's tailored a bit. So if we're going to bring it back that way, I'd like to say, could we just frame it a little bit differently? Rather than talking about ordinance language, talking about problems and solutions, and then to the degree that there's an ordinance change that's required, let's talk about what that would be, to get back to solving whatever or addressing more effectively the problem is. Because the current ordinance doesn't do it.
Not really.
And I don't want to put residents or our public safety folks, our police officers, or code enforcement in positions to have unenforceable ordinances either. And so maybe if it is a general business discussion, let's start with clarifying the problem and what are all the options for solving noise as it continues to get worse in the community.
So you're more in favor of bringing it back again on a general business item to discuss instead of an ordinance?
Not with the ordinance language, or as a more basic frame on what's the problem and how we're going to solve it. And is there an ordinance change that would help with that, rather than starting with an ordinance and hoping that we solve a problem.
Okay. Okay. So, Councilor Yarbrough, you agree, but on which part? As bring it back at general business or on first reading? General business. Okay. More discussion needed. Would it help if counselors emailed you with their specific? Why don't we do that? Let's all just email. Do you want us to meet Harold, David?
David and Zach and Jeff.
David, Zach, and Jeff. Leave Harold out of it. I got that part. So, okay, that's the direction. Email Harold, Jeff, and Zach on. I just can't not email you. David, Zach, and Jeff with your recommendations or concerns or comments. Thank you very much. All right, we're on to the next general business item, which is a joint meeting with Historic Preservation Commission to discuss policy issues. Oh, that shouldn't be on there? It's on mine.
Oh, that is on.
It is on mine.
That actually happened to me a while back where for some reason I was on an online version and it didn't clear out because I had a moment when I thought something was on.
Yeah, this is an August 9th meeting. That's why.
Shh, don't say it in public.
Click here. And back here.
It's late. It's the witching hour. Thank you.
There, yes.
So we're on final call. Public invited to be heard. Brian Johnston. Brian, name and address, please.
Brian Johnston, 926 Kaufman. Councilwoman Martin, I appreciate your support. You've been one of the best people. You've done a lot in helping toward this noise abatement issue. But let's not put the car stereo as part of this new language in E. Expanding the allowable distance from 25 to 300 feet was not the solution I'm looking for. 1,200% increase was not what me and the 25 business owners from downtown, an increase allotment is not what we were looking for. If it falls under A, the 25-foot rule, as Eugene says, great. If need be, let's do an F and make it its own. But let's not let's not expand it to 300 feet. That's a long distance to have to win. I live 150 feet off Main Street. These cars go by at peak times every 30 seconds. I can show you video evidence to prove this, that on Friday nights, Saturday afternoons, Saturday nights, Sunday afternoons, it averages about every 30 seconds, boom, 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 going by your house. So let's work on the language of that, but please do not expand it. Please do not expand the distance from 25 to 1,200 feet. That's allowable. But I do appreciate you taking the time. It's an issue that affects a lot of people, and this isn't just about me. This is about the people in the nursing home at Maine, the people that are burying a loved one at the funeral home on Mountain View and Maine. It's about the people that have patio dining and that live in Roosevelt apartments. There are hundreds of people that live close to major roadways and are affected by these loud car stereos every day, and it's sometimes constant for hours at a time, especially downtown on Main Street. So I appreciate your attention to it, but let's not expand the distance to 1,200. Let's talk about some other solutions. I'll email you a few. I've done a lot of research on what other municipalities have done, and I'll share those, and let's go from there.
Don't email us. Email.
Email who?
Zach, Jeff, and David.
Zach, Jeff, and David. Okay. Thanks for the time.
Ralph Groswald.
I know it's late, so I'll try to be brief. I had the opportunity to meet you when I was interviewed for a position on the Sustainability Advisory Board. We spoke briefly, and I'm now on that board, so hopefully I'll get a chance to get to know all of you. When we look at issues like climate change and the war in Ukraine, something like the issue of noise in our community seems small, but this really is a concern. I try to think more globally, but this is personal in my particular case because I live on 9th, sort of across from Fox Hill Country Club, not far from Union Reservoir. 9th Avenue at 5 o'clock in the morning, there's very loud noise, both the stereo and very loud mufflers, motorcycles. And I know that for our neighborhood, which is a lovely neighborhood, everybody's hearing this beginning around 5 or 5:30 in the morning. And it is really, really intrusive. So I'm really interested in this issue. When I saw that this was coming up, I thought I wanted to come to the council meeting and learn more about it. And so one of the questions that I have is, how can a citizen participate? I'd like to add, I have been on study committees for the city council where I've lived previously. I'd like to help if I can with this. And I'd like to have a little better understanding what a citizen can do. The other gentleman mentioned, what do other municipalities do? I'd be really interested to know, and I'll plan to do my own research and see what I can find out, but be really interested to know what would be an avenue that individuals can help in this approaching this situation.
Thank you very much.
Would anybody be able to answer that question?
We usually don't engage back and forth with public invited to be heard.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Mayor and council comments. Are there any comments from councilors? Oh, I do see Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I know we've only done a first reading on changing the Fair Campaign Act to require a street address or P.O. box for people who donate to campaigns. But as an expression of their First Amendment rights, that's what that donation is, I would assume going forward that when people come to that podium and refuse to give us an address or give us what we know not to be the address of their residence, that they will be as accountable for people making donations, that you, Mayor Peck, will not allow somebody to not, I think the charter calls for that public invited to be heard, that people state their address, and that they're going to be as accountable when they're there as they are if they're going to donate to a campaign.
Councilor Hidalgo Faring.
This is more just to advise, let staff know and my council colleagues know and public. I'm going in for sinus surgery. A lot of you already know. But I'm going to be out of it for a couple of weeks. I will try to get online next Tuesday, if I can. If I'm not doing well, I may have to step down from that. But I think it's the LHA commissioners meeting. So and I'll get caught up with you, Harold, on anything I miss.
Thank you. So as far as the residents giving their address, I do understand why they don't want to. I've been in that position and didn't want anybody to know where I live. But I did talk, Harold and I had a very, very preliminary conversation about maybe we can do this through technology. Very preliminary on how we can get addresses, but not make it in the public forum so that people who don't need to know the addresses don't get them. So we'll have more discussion on that at some later dates probably. So Harold, do you have any comments for us?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Eugene?
No comments, Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez to adjourn. All those in favor, just voice. Aye. Good night.